Good morning, members. Good morning, Commissioner. Good morning, officers. Thank you for joining us for today's quarterly police and crime panel. We have got a fair bit to cover on the agenda, so I think we will dive right in. Item number 1 on the agenda is apologies. Have we received any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Sidaway.
Thank you. Item 2, minutes of the last meeting to be confirmed. Do we have I'm happy to propose the minutes. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Item number 3, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest concerning today's agenda? Okay, thank you. Item 4, public participation. Have we had any representations from the public?
No, Chair. No questions from the public and no petitions.
Thank you. Then that brings us very swiftly onto the quarterly monitoring report. So we will, firstly, just to give a quick overview of how we'll approach this, we will ask the Police and Crime Commissioner to introduce this item, and then we will open up the floor to our members and priority leads to ask questions. So without further ado, I will pass on to the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I should introduce my staff. I'm joined this morning by my Chief Executive, Simon Bullock, my Director of Operations, Adam Harold, and my Chief Financial Officer, Julie Strange. And as you say, the first item is the quarterly report, which talks about quarter 1, which is April, May, June. So as you will recall, we have 6 priorities within the police and crime plan. These were derived from the desires of the people of Dorset. They became manifesto commitments from me, and then priorities in the police and crime plan. The first one is to cut crime and antisocial behaviour. And I'm pleased to say that total crime continues to fall, and also that when we come to the first item, which is crime and antisocial behaviour, we are now running at the lowest antisocial behaviour that we've had since 2007, 2008. That's partly because the police have a priority around it called Operation Relentless, but also because in this quarter we launched the 5th round of the Operation Relentless Community Fund. This awarded £49,623 to 12 organisations who came forward with plans in order to address antisocial behaviour. And what this has now done, the 5th round builds on the previous ones. We've got over 50 locations in Dorset which has received this funding to reduce ASB. In addition, we also had the Hotspot Policing Initiative, Operation Track. That started the year before. It started in Bournemouth and Weymouth. The success of that, where 70% of the hotspot places had a reduction in violence and ASB, allows us to move forward again this year and actually spread it further across Dorset. And as you can see in the paper, this resulted in 1,467 hours of targeted patrols in those hotspots, with a good result coming forward. I'm not going to talk through every piece on this, otherwise we'd be here all day, but I would like to pick up on something else, which is the operation which was done on the B3157 Coast Road, where 34 drivers were caught speeding. Now, it's important to note that those sorts of operations in that intensity is something which gets mounted relatively infrequently, but all the time the road policing are out there doing the job and catching speeding. We did this particularly because of the need of that coast road, which is a hotspot for speeding. And we utilised virtually every asset we had, including drones, in order to make certain that we made a difference. It wasn't just about the operation. It was about the communication about the operation, which saw speeding fall for longer than just the time that the police were out there. So that's something which we were looking to emulate in other places across Dorset. And the third one, which I will highlight, is that of dwelling burglary, which is flat but continues to be less than when I came into office. We are not complacent about that. A home safety leaflet was distributed by police cadets and shared with all the neighbourhood watches to give to their residents. So I think I'm going to hold it there on that first one. So we now move to what I term the oil tanker out of the priorities, the hardest one to make really effective so that people feel it. And that is about making policing more visible and connected. So here it is a matter of balancing resource with the need of what we need to happen. I'm really pleased that we continue to have a good result with 999 calls, because at the point of need, that is the most important thing when somebody needs the police. We have had extra funding from the neighbourhood police guarantee into neighbourhood policing roles. That will allow us to put more police officers by the end of the year. However, it would be wrong of me not to mention the fact that Dorset got the smallest amount in the neighbourhood policing guarantee of any force. So whilst we're grateful for it, and we will put more police out there, it could be better. You will hear me speak more about that later, no doubt. The other thing that we have also moved forward with is the community contact points. Now, these are where we're trying to bring policing to the people, into the communities. And we've got 614 of those now. What I'm clear about is they have to be in the right places. They have to be where people will go and see the police. And there has to be a greater connectivity between the police and the local democratically elected members in order to make certain they are putting them in the right place. There is now something called an engagement board in Dorset Police, which we haven't had before, which is now firmly embedded, and that will be monitoring the effect of community contact points and other aspects of engagement. I will talk about the red line around 101. That continues to be a running sore for me. It mentions there the use of police powers and standards scrutiny panel, which we held in this quarter. I was very clear that I was not satisfied with the 101 answer time at that panel, and I wanted more granularity and understanding about that. So we are going to move forward. The Chief Constable and I are completely wedded to the idea that we have to improve the secondary call handling. But we're not going to sacrifice the 999 for that, if you see what I mean. Moving on, we've got to fight violent crime and high harm. And there's three elements here that I'd just like to talk about briefly. The first is the need to address illegal gateway drugs. I've spoken about that consistently for 4 years. The government is beginning to listen. One of the issues that has come to the fore is that of ketamine. And through the Combating Drugs Partnership, I have firmly put that on the agenda for Dorset. I also went and opened an event which was run by Treatment and Recovery across Dorset about the issues of ketamine. Now, we were expecting a relatively small audience. We had over 400 stakeholders come to that meeting to discuss it, which is utterly brilliant. It included talks from people with lived experience, the effects of ketamine, stats and prevention. So we've got to move forward with that. I am hopeful that there will be further movement by the government on it. When we look at violence reduction, I obviously supported Knife Crime Awareness Week. It's worth noting that our knife offences are reducing in Dorset off of a base which has us as the 5th lowest in the country. Nevertheless, too many of our young people carry knives. And what I'm pleased that we've been able to do is, despite not having a violence reduction unit, we've been able to use, in effect, start creating elements of it anyway. So there's two here: a focused deterrent program with the Youth Justice Service. This will target 10 to 18-year-olds identified as high risk of causing high harm. Now, what we've done is we've picked elements of VRUs around the country which we see are working. So the other one is the A&E Navigator scheme. This scheme will see workers in A&E engaging with people up to the age of 25 to try and work with them when they come in and they're obviously involved in violent crime or drug crime. So that's the elements that I'd like to highlight from the point of view of priority 3. I should note that the most serious violence is again reducing, and so is the violence against the person. If I move to number 4, which is to fight rural crime. Again, we've got a drop in rural crime. I myself went out with the rural crime team on Operation Galileo, which is to target hair courses. Galileo operates with our partners. On this occasion, I was with Wiltshire as well as Dorset, making certain that we are patrolling the border. There's been a 25% reduction in poaching in the last 4 years, and we need to continue that. Dorset Police led the regional rural crime operational meeting. That's where the forces in the southwest come together. We are collaborating more and more because we know that the serious organised crime elements in the rural communities operate across borders, and therefore our operation across borders is more and more important. And then the last one that I'll mention here, actually I'm going to lie, I'm going to mention 2. One is the fly tipping. The fact that we have funded a fly tipping investigator, and that means that 440 fly tip and scenes of crime were visited. That person has allowed Dorset Police to seize more vehicles, and indeed has basically revolutionised the number of fines for residential and commercial operators. So that is a success story for Dorset, the fact that we have this fly tipping investigator. And the last one is, we talk about rural resources, we talk about agricultural theft. One of the best ways to address it is to have prevention. And I'm pleased that the rural crime team have given out 820 rural crime packs now, not just to farmers, but also other rural businesses like saddleries, etc., in order to basically help with that prevention. Moving on to priority 5, which is putting victims and communities first. And I'll be brief here. We've got 3 elements I'd like to highlight. We have recommissioned the Dorset Restorative Justice Service to make certain that we have restorative justice solutions. That is victim-led, as it should be. We've also addressed an issue around the support for victims generally. And so with the police, I'm funding a victims champion. That is to make certain that the victim's experience improves. And also we have renewed the victim service contract with victim support to make certain we provide support to victims of volume crime, antisocial behaviour, and standard risk domestic assault. The last one I'm going to mention is something which I'm very keen on. One of the issues we have when we look at antisocial behaviour, for example, or criminality, we've got great kids in Dorset, we've got some who fall into other things. And we want to understand that better. So basically, we've launched a youth participation strategy. That's a call out to under 25s to share their opinions. We've done the first consultation with that. And we've also funded a pilot project which supports up to 20 young people at risk of permanent exclusion from school. Because if we can keep them in school, we can keep them in a place where they will flourish and keep them safe from crime. The last one is to make every penny count. So I'm very pleased that we got £1 million for the hotspot policing project. You've heard what I've said about that already, so I won't go forward. We remain the second worst funded force in the country. I have highlighted that in other areas, not just to the government, but to other people who could help us. For example, in the rural sphere, and I will keep battling in order to address that issue until we get that unfairness sorted. And the last one I'll talk about is one of the things which has always confused me is when we went into the strategic alliance, our actual measures were not as precise as they should be in order to measure its success. So with Devon and Cornwall, what we've done is we're taking part in a priority-based budgeting process. This spans several months. It will review the cost, benefits, and performance of 12 business areas within the Strategic Alliance to rapidly assess and reprioritize budgets to make certain that those are as efficient as possible in order to deliver for the people of Dorset. And that, Chair, is where I'll stop. Otherwise, as I say, we could talk for ages.
Thank you, Commissioner, for that detailed overview. It's very welcome to hear the hard work and progress that's being made. I will now open the floor to our members, and we will ask questions according to each priority area, if any are available. So, bear with me. We'll start with policing area priority 1, cut crime and antisocial behaviour. I have a question that was previously submitted by Councillor Trent. Over to you.
Chair. Oh, right. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the KPI for killed and seriously injured is currently showing as red for Q1. Can the PCC please provide some detail as to what factors are influencing the red performance, and sort of nature of accident and things like that, you know, is perhaps quite important in this. It would be helpful also to see a breakdown of impacts across both authority areas, and in particular the split between rural and urban areas.
Thank you. And yes, it is red. In Dorset, the killed or serious injured casualty figures for Q1 2025, which is the April to June, what we're discussing, shows an increase compared to the quarter in 2024. This is in a specific area. So fatal casualties have slightly decreased, which follows an expected downward trend. Slight casualties have notably decreased. The area is serious casualties have risen, and that's what drives the KSI increase. Now, between 2018 and 2021, the Department of Transport carried out a review of what was called the Stats 19 data recording process to improve the accuracy and consistency of road casualty data. So Stats 19 is the system that the police use across Great Britain to record personal injury collisions. It captures the detailed information about crashes. It includes the circumstance, the vehicles, and the casualties. So this data supports the DFT's annual reported road casualties in Great Britain statistics. The update process provides more detailed injury information, automatically assigning severity levels and reducing reliance on police officer judgment and statistical adjustments. Forces using crash collision software began adopting this new system in 2023, with other forces following on in 2024 and 2025. Now, Dorset actually implemented this in March 2025. So this change in reporting may have caused inconsistencies with previously observed trends for serious casualties. Now, the changes in reporting are being seen county-wide across all road users groups. We know that much. The KSI data isn't tagged for local authority area. It's not grouped for either urban or rural. However, the increase in casualty figures was discussed at the September Dorset Road Safety Partnership meeting. And the road safety confirmed that detailed analysis is already underway to identify the factors driving the rise, because we're not going to be complacent and just think this is a data recording issue. And we want to know if other factors have contributed. The results are expected to be presented at the next Dorset Road Safe in December. So the team's going to continue to monitor casualty figures closely. The assumption at the meeting which I was at is that actually we are still on target when we look beyond the Q1 data. But we'll see where we are at the next meeting, and I'll have more detail following the next meeting. I am not complacent about this. We've got a good record. In fact, I think we're third or fourth lowest in the country, actually. And I want us to continue doing that, and I want us to continue being on target. But that's the information I've got currently.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Trent, do you have a follow-up?
Thank you for that answer. The one thing I was sort of trying to angle towards was whether there was actually a common factor in the type of accidents, not so much the statistics, that whether there was a particular condition during the, those months that sort of added to the accident rate, whether it be sort of weather or, particular nature of sort of driving, because, sometimes there's a sort of a trend that you can say, oh, yeah, there's something that needs to be looked at specifically.
There was nothing obvious which came out of the meeting. That was the first question everybody asked. Is there something driving this? Is it the type of vehicle? Is it the road condition? What is it? And there's nothing obvious. So they're going to have a deep dive to check.
Thank you both for the question and the discussion. Do we have any other questions under priority one? Councillor Wood?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is, I guess, a sort of a follow-up on the previous question. The targets we have here are kind of relative targets. So we're saying we want it to trend down compared to this quarter last year. And we're saying, like, if it goes down by 1, that is a green, I'm presuming, or is there a tolerance in that? With this kind of spike with the killed or seriously injured, does that mean that if that number goes down compared to this elevated value, we're going to see that as a green, even though, let's say, it's higher than last year's one? So we're kind of seeing a reset of the point at which it's a good trend sort of thing.
Thank you. If we're going to get into the numbers and the statistics, I'm going to pass across to my Director of Operations. Sorry.
Morning, thank you. We actually have an answer to a question we expect will come up later, which explains this as well. But for all our KPIs, they follow one of 3 criteria to determine whether they're red or green. So that would be when a value falls adversely outside the expected range of a rolling 3-year mean. So in other words, a large peak. When there have been 3 consecutive increasing quarters, or when 3 consecutive quarters have been above their respective means. So to answer your question, it shouldn't just change to green because there's been one change. You should be able to follow the trend. In this case, this quarter was significantly above the mean. Later on, there's a paper for OpSnap which will show that over a longer period of time, nevertheless, casualties have been going down as per the target. So the 2 things can be true at the same time.
Councillor Wood, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, thank you. Just in the follow-up, if we have those mean values, can we get them in the reports as well, just so that we can see that where that is comparative?
It's certainly something we could provide, but I wouldn't recommend it in the report. It would simply be too much data.
Is this an area we could consider for a key line of inquiry to dig a little deeper into what the data's telling us around KSIs?
What you put on your forward plan, Chair, is entirely up to you. So we will respond as appropriate.
I will direct that question to Councillor Wood for consideration. We can have a discussion about the forward work plan after the meeting. Thank you. Do we have any other questions regarding priority one? Councillor Wood again.
Sorry, just on the, so there's the home safety leaflet that was distributed by police cadets. Is that similar to the one that you were distributing via the estate agents and things like that, or it's a completely separate leaflet?
It's a different one. I mean, similar information, but it's different.
If there are no further questions on priority one, we'll move to priority two, making policing more visible and connected. We have a question that was submitted by Councillor Bown.
Oh, thank you, Chair. So I was glad, Commissioner, to hear you're as disappointed as I am with the 101 response times. I'm just wondering, what insight do you have into what is causing that? And do you have any insight into what actually might be able to change to make those figures come down?
Yes, is the answer. There are a number of factors here. So reducing it remains a significant challenge because what we receive 140,000 non-emergency calls. That's gone up. But 74% are answered within 60 seconds, with an average answer time of 67 seconds. So 3/4 of them are answered very quickly at the first point of contact. And the actual length of time of that handle, if you like, is about 3 minutes. So that means that within around 4 minutes, 3 out of 4 callers have had their call answered. They've either been passed on with information, received information, requested a call back, or signposted to another service or agency as appropriate. The delay occurs with the remaining 26% of calls, which were transferred to what is called secondary call handling. Now that's the number. So the last quarter, it took an average of 23 minutes to answer these calls. Now there's a few reasons why they get transferred. The caller themselves preferring to wait on the line. The call handler basically assesses each one through the threat, risk, and harm and vulnerability in the incident type. And some of these are really quite complex calls. So what we're doing about that performance is addressing it, but the problem we've got is we get peak demands, particularly in the summer. During these peak periods, it's not just the non-emergency call demand which increases, it's also the emergency 999 which increases. And that has to be the greater priority. Now, other relevant factors are resourcing. So over the last year, the vacancy rate within contact management has increased. The force has taken steps to improve retention rates, but I'm told that many of the leavers have joined as police officers or other roles. So they go into contact and then they will move forward into the rest of the organisation. It takes 12 months to train someone to be proficient in role. With the turnover of staff and the delays in recruitment, contact reports they've been operating without a multi-skilled workforce. The ideal would be to have everybody skilled on every aspect, and so that prevents the department's ability to surge. In addition, because of the demand and the peak in the summer months, The force puts a temporary halt on training in the summer months. So this inevitably increases abstractions during the remainder of the year. So those are the factors that are being juggled all the time. It explains the statistics. But what I'm heartened about is that, as I said, at the last ups in this quarter, I was very direct about there needed to be a better understanding about the granularity in the contact room. I'm heartened that that is now being gripped. I'm heartened that there is a firm plan around recruitment and training, and there is a trajectory around that. It will take time because of the 12 months to train people. So we need more people being hired, and we need more training. What would help is if we were able to invest in technology. But we can't invest in technology. There isn't a technological solution that we can invest in which would solve our problem with the funding envelope we've got. We have, as one of the things that we've written to the government about, is put in a call for funding in order to revolutionise the contact systems. But that will require something like £10 million, which we don't have. So those are the factors and those are the reasons. I will push as hard as I can. I know the Chief Constable is very clear that we need to sort this. We can't sort it by compromising 999. We can't sort it by compromising the 75% who get answered very quickly. We have to work through those pieces in order to get it. So I hope that gives you a bit more detail as to the why.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do you have a follow-up?
Thank you, Commissioner. That was very thorough. I'm interested in the. I didn't quite follow the statistics at the beginning because obviously in the report it tells us that the average answer time is 23%, but you're telling me that's only 23% of 25% of them because 75% of them are answered quickly. I'm finding that's quite tough to follow.
So you've got 75%, which is answered quickly. Yes. You've got 75% of the 101 calls which are answered quickly. You've got 25% which take, or can take, let's be fair, can take, some of them can take significantly longer. And overall, it's 23 minutes. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. I don't think that's... Sorry, Miss, that does make sense. Thank you, that does make sense. That wasn't quite how you framed it at the start, but thank you.
I have a brief follow-on question on this subject. It's interesting that seasonality is impacting the training schedule. So if I understood correctly, over the summer, training was suspended for 3 months due to the seasonal demand. Is that anticipated again next summer? And is that taken into account on the 12-month training duration? Or are we really looking at 15 months?
So the answer is yes to both of those questions. It's anticipated that there won't be the training in the summer. Look, we know what we get. We know we get 25 million day visitors. We know that demand goes up. And if we've got police officers, it doesn't matter whether they're staff in the contact room or whether they're police officers generally. If they're on training, they're not doing the job that we want them to do. And we need them to do it.
I would note that it is interesting to see how wide the impact of seasonality is across all aspects of policing, and I think it's something that we will revisit. So thank you for that. Councillor Ampton.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, can I apologise for my late arrival? I have literally been driving around for 40 minutes trying to find a parking space, and that was after a diversion. So I hope I didn't miss anything too important. But I do have a couple of follow-on questions, if I may, for Mrs. Sidgwick. And with respect, Mrs. Sidgwick, I find that key indicator figure slightly disingenuous because although you're correct in saying the average time, it would have been helpful to know that X number of calls are answered in that very short period, but sometimes it could be 60 minutes, 90 minutes, we don't know. So it would have been helpful to have had a bit more detail about that. But my question, I have two questions really. How does Dorset Police compare in their 101 answer time to other neighbouring forces? And my second question is, if you're saying it takes 12 months to train people, what is your ambition for, say, 12 to 18 months' time? What does that percentage look like? And if you could break it down into those bits, the quick answer time, that's okay, but the longer answer time, what is your ambition for that? Thank you.
There are no national stats on 101. They haven't been issued. I do know that there's a lot of apples and pears when you discuss it with other forces. So I can't give you an answer on that. My ambition, you're asking me a time frame. I will try and put a time frame on it. End of 2027, because of the length of times. That's the latest discussion that I've had. And where I'd like to get to, well, it would be lovely, wouldn't it? It would be lovely to say all calls are dealt with and answered in 10 minutes. But I think we have to think of something else here, and that is the quality of the call is also as important as the call being done. And some of those calls are really complicated with people who have real issues around vulnerability and complexity. So they can't be done quickly. So I think there's a problem if you try and put a absolute mandated short figure on that average. But it doesn't need to be where it is at 23.1, and it needs to be significantly lower in my view.
Councillor Hampton, do you have a follow-up?
No, I don't think I have, thank you. I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you for the question. Councillor Woods.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a question about, so in the spotlight section here, you're mentioning the foot patrols in particular and how they make people feel safer. None of the measures of success or key indicators in the report are actually around foot patrols specifically, but can you just kind of go around how that's going and what metrics you kind of do measure success in that aspect using?
So this is around the foot patrols. We would measure, and I'm certain that if I forget anything, my team will help me. We measure the hours that they do, the number of patrols that they do, and within that we will measure the arrests, the civil orders that they give. If you look in the report, then it does talk about, for example, Section 35s. It will also measure the number of stop and searches that they do. So those are the metrics which we look at. And actually, I would say those metrics are actually, they're mandated from the Home Office in that we have to report back to them on the metrics as well. Because they've given us that extra funding, they want to know how it's being used.
Yeah, if I can just follow up on that. Okay, yeah. So in general, are they trending in the correct direction would be my question in terms of, and is it kind of what you would hope it would be, or do you think it could go further?
With the money we've got, it's where we hoped it to be. If we had more money, we could do more. And we could do more and preserve everything else, like training and all the rest of it, like we've just discussed. We have this situation at the moment where the whole year is kind of driven by making certain that we've got the summer demand sorted. And that affects virtually everything else we've got, including, dare I say it, on the officers. If they're doing 12-hour shifts, which is the normality, I'm afraid, of the summer, and they're having rest days cancelled. They've got to take those rest days another time. So it basically, it overshadows everything.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Woods. And I would also note that, again, summer resourcing and the seasonality impact is a perennial influence here. Do we have further questions from the floor? Councillor Gibson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I want to just ask a little bit about what was mentioned in your opening remarks, Commissioner, about improvements to engagement from the police. You mentioned about an engagement board. That sounds interesting. Are you able to give us a bit more information about what that is and what it's doing, and crucially, who's on it?
Well, what I'm going to do, because I don't sit on it, but Adam does, is I'm going to pass to my Director of Operations who sits on it. This board has been set up in response to the issue around Priority 2 and the fact that it will always be below going to a rape, going to a murder, sorting out public disorder. Those are big ticket items the police will always think about. Engaging with the public is important. And it's the single thing which I think is going to take longest to fix. Part of it is resource, part of it is actually changing culture. And so I'll hand over to Adam for the detail.
Thank you, Commissioner. So the Neighbourhood Engagement Board was set up maybe a year to 18 months ago now. It's a force-run board. I believe it's about to be chaired by the Head of Communications and Engagement. It had been chaired by Neighbourhood Policing Superintendent. It's attended by a variety of mainly force employees, but also reps from the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, myself included, but also our Head of Comms and Engagement. From the force perspective, they have the Communications and Engagement Department. They have PCSOs, Neighbourhood Engagement Officers, who specialise in engagement across the geography, as well as leadership from the force. And others involved in the events and engagements that take place throughout the year. There are a couple of things that the board's set up to deal with, of course, to address the commitments within the Police and Crime Plan, and specifically the neighbourhood engagement commitments, which we've mentioned before at this panel and are available on the Force website under the Neighbourhood Policing Team pages, but also the Neighbourhood Policing Guarantee and the various parts of that that relate to neighbourhood policing. The reason the board was established was to make sure that not only the metrics for that could be tracked, so the neighbourhood engagement commitments, one of the questions is, how does the force make sure they're doing the things that they've committed to do? And also, how does the force make sure that it shares a good learning and practice? So some areas will do things better than others, and how do they share that amongst the neighbourhood policing teams? How do they make sure that there's a consistency across the different areas? But also, in that, just to make sure that when we have feedback from the public, that there is a proper conversation about how that can be embedded in terms of the work, to make sure at all times that the engagement that's being done isn't just what the force feels instinctively might be right, but it's actually informed by the data. So, for instance, we've talked about the mobile police station, the community contact points, so things like that are discussed in terms of how well they went, what are the metrics that suggest that they're doing what they should be doing, and what other research can we do to improve it. So it's a really positive development from the board, and I think a commitment from the force to take this work seriously and try to strive for better.
Any follow-up, Councillor Wood? Councillor Gibson, I'm terribly sorry.
No, that's all right. Thank you very much. Look, I agree. It's a positive step forward, and I do wonder if some consideration could be given about perhaps slightly expanding the membership of who could participate in that excuse me, in that piece of work. I think this is very sort of community focused, very sort of public driven, and lots of us within the local authorities would think that we're well placed to assist with that piece of work. If it's not doing if it's not dealing with highly confidential police-only matters, I do wonder whether the consideration could be given about expanding who sits on that to be a part of it. You mentioned the community contact points and the mobile police station in that. they were two things that I had on my list here to say, look, thank you, these appear to be doing good work. The mobile police stations come to my ward twice now, and it's good. It's better than I expected it to be, and I'm pleased with that. Because in this panel before, I have raised that I'm still not completely convinced about community contact points versus police stations. So I think the mobile police station seems to be a good halfway house that, at least for now, seems worth giving a go. And I'm going to try and support that and make sure that my community know when it's in our area. But there was a specific example that came to our area recently during the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy work in August, where the community contact point went for the first time, as I can see it, to Moores Valley for the park run. So it came on a Saturday morning to the park run to try and address a very specific problem that often female runners have when they're out running, perhaps late at night, and they feel vulnerable in doing so. So the community contact point went to park run, and I thought that was fantastic. I was really, really pleased to see it. But I can't help thinking from that sort of innovation is so welcome, and yet I know where there's weak spots in my community that I would love to have a conversation with someone somewhere about where contact points could diversify where they go. And it sounds like you've got a board here where this is being discussed, and yet there are those of us around that I think would add value to that. So not a question, but more a plea. Could you think about letting us get a bit more involved?
Well, thank you for the good feedback, Councillor Gibson, both on the mobile police station and indeed the community contact points. I've been very clear that community contact points should be used and used effectively in two areas. One area is where there's high footfall. There's no point putting them somewhere where nobody goes. And that was the problem we had with some of the front offices, which is why nobody used them. So the issue which you talk about, though, and the specificity of that community contact point, that's also something which the police are now looking at. Because if there's a problem, they can use them tactically in order to address it. And that is a brilliant, brilliant example. So thank you for that. Now, moving onwards, as to the integration of community thought with the police around community contact points and mobile police station, I'm absolutely clear that they should be talking to the local elected members. And the local elected members should have a voice. And that is a mantra which we will be feeding in through the engagement board. We've already started. I've been saying it from the year dot, because I think that's really, really important. Because if the community contact point's in the wrong place, then you guys will know about it. And that would allow it to be fixed. Biggest problem we've got is consistency, which is why another reason why the board exists, to share best practice between it. But we'll keep pushing, and I hear what you're saying because I agree with it, and I think there should be more connection as to the where and the how of the contact points. So I'll keep driving for it. All right?
Any follow-up, Councillor Gibson? I would like to follow up on a point that Councillor Gibson made regarding participation in the board, potentially with members, and the possibility of developing that idea to potentially a panel member being able to potentially join. The members in this room have, I would say, a deeper than average understanding of policing issues and how it reflects in their wards. And I think panel members could give some really insightful contribution to the process. I'd be generally interested in your thoughts on that.
I think that's something I'd like to think about, because obviously my whole job is to represent the people. And I take inputs from the whole of Dorset, there's 80 councillors in Dorset and about the same in BCP. I take inputs from a vast number. I would rather that it comes via me through my team into the board rather than an individual councillor on the board. So that's where I am with that, because otherwise we're in danger of having one view. The way I do it is I get lots and lots of views, and my whole purpose of existence is to make certain to hold the police to account and to drive that forward. So that's the way I prefer to do it, via my team taking the views from everybody.
Also should add, and I may have done this a misservice, so the neighbourhood engagement commitments as they're set out include the need for MPTs to liaise with their local community and specifically politicians and councillors in the area for exactly the reasons that you've outlined. So what the board is doing is checking that that has taken place. So there is a mechanism already devolved out to the geography because there are so many people with good views and good insights. And what the board should be doing, is attempting to do, is to make sure that that happens. So as the Commissioner said, very happy to receive the feedback if it hasn't happened, but the view would be that the board shouldn't need to do that because it's monitoring that it is already taking place as agreed.
Councillor Gibson.
Thank you. Look, thank you, Chair. You asked the question that I was going to ask and didn't ask, but the answer is fair enough for now, I think. Given that the Commissioner, you mentioned about consistency, I think I'm willing to give you and your team space to make sure it becomes consistent. You know, I've raised it with you several times that the offer to councillors in the East was significantly weaker than it was, for example, in BCP. However, in the last quarter, we finally got them set up now, and we've met twice. So perhaps if come the new year, I don't feel that that has been an effective mechanism, I'll ask the question again.
That's absolutely fine. I mean, to give you an example of where we are, I can think in the last couple of weeks, I've had 3 representations from different councillors about different elements of contact and engagement, which will be taken forward to the next engagement board. So, yeah, it should work. I'm glad you're getting a better experience. What I'm interested in is where somebody isn't getting that experience. Thank you.
This is a very interesting subject. So just yesterday, the Bournemouth North MPC did its member engagement session. It was very well attended. I think it's fair to say that we have a good dialogue between our ward members and that particular MPT. I'm interested in how the discussions we have in those member engagement sessions are fed back. Is there a mechanism for what's discussed in those member sessions to be fed back to the engagement board? Is that something that is happening?
In some, yes, but at a higher level. It's more the board is checking that they have taken place and that there is evidence it's taken place. What the board wouldn't do, and of course it couldn't do, is individually by area, get into a conversation about specifically the logistics of the CCPs and the priorities that have been raised. It's more about checking that those conversations have taken place, that the MPTs can name their key community contacts, can demonstrate that they've attended meetings, set out messages, and the sort of you said we did approach on the website. It's less in the detail of the specifics which will be discussed by the MPTs themselves.
Thank you for the clarity. Are there any other follow-ups on this particular item? Then we have a question that was submitted from Councillor Bown.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep this brief. I'm aware we're 40 minutes into our 75 minutes for this section and we're only on priority 2, so I will keep this brief. But I'd like to look at the other key indicator, which is victim satisfaction in terms of being kept informed. I wonder if you're as worried as I am that you think that this might discourage reporting if members of the public feel that they're not having feedback from officers, and I wonder what you think we can do to reassure victims or people who've reported crimes that their calls do matter.
Well, thank you, and you've raised a perennial question about how we can get more people to report. It's important to say that whilst there's well-established links between victim satisfaction and crime reporting, what we actually know, though, is that it's going up, the reports. In the first quarter of this financial year, whether 999 or 101, it's marginally up on the quarter of the previous year. 999 calls are up 6%, 101 calls are up 2%. And also the use of the website has increased significantly. This volume grew by 18% in the first quarter of this year compared to last year. So more and more people are reporting. In terms of victim services, though, this is an area that's regularly inspected by the HMIC FRS. I'm pleased to say that Dorset Police takes it seriously. The force undertakes frequent and in-depth reviews in the victim services covering the 5 core areas of call handling, deployment and response, crime recording, investigations and outcomes. They're subject to internal review. There is also, I mentioned it when I did the review at the start, a new post which I'm part funding with the Dorset Police, which is a victims champion. And basically that will give additional scrutiny on this, which will then come forward to the Force Performance Board, which we scrutinise. So the statistics. The regular survey shows there's approximately 1,500 victims per year. These are Dorset residents aged 16 plus. They're victims of hate crime, dwelling burglary, or lower level violent crime. Together, these are combined, and that's where the overall merged crime measure. And that actually shows there's a steady improvement. It's still red because it wasn't where it was originally. And it fell, and it remains the weakest area. Performance is now stable, and as I say, this is just beginning to increase. But we lost the Victims Bureau staff through the Mars scheme earlier in the back late last year, and the loss of the body van as well. So 2 elements of victim support, unfortunately, because of the funding, had to go, and that will have had an effect. The important thing to note, though, is recognizing that improvements need to be made, and they absolutely do, which is why I've co-funded the Victims Champion. The force needs to provide, this is where it's not getting it right, more frequent and timely updates. That's the piece which is happening. The survey reports that when it does happen, police officers and staff are attentive, professional and knowledgeable. And victims feel they're made to feel safe, supported, they're understood, and their overall satisfaction with the treatment by police staff remains high. So the negative comments is talking about lack of updates, delay in attending or contacting the victim. And there's also, unfortunately, occurrences when the reality doesn't match up with what the victim's been told is going to happen. So I'm very clear that the force mustn't overpromise and say they're going to talk to them in 12 hours if it's going to be 3 days. Do you see what I mean? Where I'd like to get to, but we can't at the moment, is I'd like to get to a stage where you could go like Amazon and track your package. You could track how your case is occurring. But that is a technological solution that is extremely expensive, which we can't afford. So where we are is that the service offered is good, but there's not enough to keep up with the pace of demand. And to address this, we're going to prioritize where individuals are contacted with meaningful updates to pass on, but not necessarily keeping in touch just to tell them that there's nothing to tell them, if you see what I mean. Work to improve wider victim services is ongoing, but to manage expectations, this is all about budget. There's other factors, however, which also address the issue of people not wanting to report. There is the overall constant zeitgeist that nothing will happen, which is continually perpetuated by elements of the mainstream media, but also on social media. Very often I will see on Facebook, somebody will say, this has happened. And somebody will say, well, don't bother reporting because the police don't do anything. Well, the police do. We know that reports have gone up. Police act on those reports. And they will always act where they've got the intelligence in order to address the issues. Reports drive intelligence, and they also drive resources. So we've all got, every single one of us has got a duty to keep on saying, please report, because the sure way for nothing to happen is not to. So thank you.
Do you have a follow-up, Councillor Bell?
No, I think in the interest of timekeeping, no, thank you, that's very thorough.
We have spent a fair amount of time on priority 2. Do we have any further questions regarding this priority? Then we will move on to priority 3, fight violent crime and high harm. We have had a number of questions submitted in advance. The first was submitted by Councillor Rampton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I was very pleased to see, Mr. Sidgwick, that you opened an event on ketamine, and it was very well attended. So my question was around having a bit more detail on the event, whether it was covering both Dorset Council and BCP areas. It wasn't something that I'd heard of, and it was something that I would have quite liked to have had attended had I heard of it, if that was appropriate. And I wondered what plans the PCC has to further raise awareness on the effects of ketamine, which is an absolutely appalling drug, which seems to be around more and more, and also further preventative work, particularly targeting young people who are those who are having their bladders and their lives destroyed by this drug. But I'd also like to know, do you think there's more emphasis on ketamine use, and that perhaps detracts from some of the other, drugs, hard and soft drugs? Does that detract because it's more focused on ketamine, or is it a wider approach and you are still doing preventative work on all drugs? Thank you.
Thank you. Look, it's a very good question. You are absolutely right. This drug, and I know this drug because I used to market it for 10 years when I was in the pharmaceutical industry. This drug should never be used chronically. It should never be used the way it is being used by our young people. We have had real tragedies, and real tragedies in Dorset. Lives destroyed, in some cases, deaths associated with it. And that's why 4 years ago, when I first became Police and Crime Commissioner, I said there's got to be a much greater emphasis about illegal gateway drugs, the things that are sold to kids initially. So the ketamine, the cannabis, the MDMA, the nitrous oxide, those sorts of things. And to answer the last question first, no, I will not stop. And yes, it is every single drug, but we are not doing enough about the illegal gateway drugs. We tend to focus on Class A. We need to do more about prevention. So without giving you the whole 9 yards, which I could do, let's talk specifically about what we've done. Before last Christmas, I was at a drug policy meeting in London. And at that drug policy meeting, myself and the police basically said very clearly, you've got to do something about ketamine, Home Office. There was an agreement around that. The guy I was sitting next to was from public health. Public health in another county where he had a ward with 135 kids in it waiting for their bladders to be removed. The government listened. When I came back, I said to the Combating Drugs Partnership, which I chair, I said, we've got to make more of an emphasis around this. And it was gripped. The recent ketamine-focused event was well attended, 400 stakeholders. Those would have been everybody from teachers in schools to drug workers to social services, health, and indeed some elements of the police and justice apparatus. It was both authorities, and is a strong commitment from both local authorities to address substance misuse across our county. It included multiple partner agencies, demonstrated a coordinated approach to prevention, and ensured that strategies, intelligence, and interventions are constantly applied across both council areas. This collaborative approach means that best practice is shared, emerging trends are noted, and resources can be targeted where they're most needed, maximising the effectiveness of prevention and early intervention efforts. But it's not enough to hold a meeting and make everybody aware. What you've got to do is you've got to have preventative work done. So that we put in place, coordinated by the CDP, a comprehensive ketamine awareness campaign. Now, this is directed at those already using. The campaign utilises social media and other communication channels to deliver clear, evidence-informed messages about the risks, while also directing individuals to appropriate sources of support and guidance. By engaging a broad audience, the campaign seeks to raise public awareness, promote informed decision-making, and encourage safer behaviours. It's part of a wider commitment to proactive community-based prevention, ensuring that accurate information is accessible to all age groups and sectors of the community. But I talk a lot about something which the government hasn't gripped, which is primary prevention. Stopping kids taking stuff in the first place. There is no money given on primary prevention. But what we've done here is we've actually put in place and supported things in order to make that difference. Something I was very keen on was to get a targeted educational intervention into schools, and we've got it. The Talk About Trust is a commissioned service. It predominantly works with senior schools to provide age-appropriate drug prevention education. Sessions focus on the risks associated with vapes, alcohol, ketamine and other drugs, cannabis. Equipping students with knowledge, resilience, and decision-making skills necessary to make informed choices. It's engaging with young people directly in their learning environments, and it aims to prevent early experimentation and reduce the likelihood of harm, supporting both immediate and long-term well-being. I ain't giving up on this, right? We have to change the dialogue. We have to change this country to have an anti-drugs culture. And looking ahead, I remain committed to sustaining and expanding these preventative efforts. I'm also going to continue the lobbying. One thing which came out of that meeting in December was that the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs was charged to look at ketamine and moving it from Class B to Class A. I fully support that change because it reflects growing concerns about harmful issues with the drug, increasing misuse, and the risk it poses to individuals and communities. Misuse of Drugs Act got it wrong. By saying there's Class B and Class C, you're saying those things are less harmful. They're just harmful over a longer period of time, as ketamine shows so well. And I won't rest until we stop having this stuff and other stuff like it hurting our kids. Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up?
I don't know if the PCC will be able to answer this, but you mentioned the stakeholders who came along to the ketamine event, and we each have in our councils, we have public health officers with a fairly hefty budget. So I wondered what your experience was of the engagement from public health, because certainly I, for one, don't seem to have seen anything disseminated through our council. And it would be very helpful for us councillors who are out there in our communities and talking to people who are, whose families are being destroyed by drugs. Thank you.
Well, I've seen peerless support from public health. Public health, both from BCP and from Dorset. They attend the CDP. They were actually instrumental in putting together this meeting, which we're discussing, and the dissemination of that. You've raised an interesting point, Karen Rampton. I will raise that with the Directors of Public Health at the next CDP meeting to mention that councillors haven't had the information that they feel they should have had. Thank you.
Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very pleased to hear about the reclassification potentially of ketamine from Class B to Class A. It's been an issue in my ward for some time, and I've seen the first-hand effects of it in my ward and in my neighbourhood. In regard to your comments on the Misuse of Drugs Act, I do agree with you in terms of the failure. Would you agree that the Misuse of Drugs Act, in terms of the classification element of it, is no longer relevant? If a drug is illegal, it should be treated equally. I'm glad that you use the term gateway drug as opposed to recreational or other terms that have been used to sort of soften the name for drugs. But at the end of the day, drugs are illegal, and possession of them are illegal. We focused on this is a health issue and focusing on dealing with people dealing drugs, which I do fully agree with both of those. But if you look at countries such as Japan, who have succeeded in limiting drug usage, there's been a greater focus around possession of drugs. Can you give me any information or an insight into how Dorset Police are handling the possession of drugs as a criminal offence?
Thank you. Well, you've touched a little bit of a raw nerve with me about the issue of possession. So let me explain. There was a white paper which had real potential to make a difference, which in my portfolio work as co-chair of the Addiction and Substance Misuse portfolio, we were asked to consult on. That has disappeared. But what that had tougher consequences for possession. But let's be clear, it was not criminalisation. So if you were to get to the stage of saying, at the moment we've gone too far. What happened was the Met Police came up with an idea of a cannabis warning. And that was used and that has been used. We actually have endorsed it. We also have a diversion approach to possession, where we will divert people to get help to understand and try and stop taking the drug. That, I think, is the right way to do it, is to get them to do that. I'm aware of Japan. I'm aware of Singapore as well. Unfortunately, I think the genie's out of the bottle here. Because if you were to take the same approach and put everybody in jail, well, I'm afraid our jails are bursting anyway. But what we've got to do is we've got to have what this white paper was saying, where there was it had a sliding scale of increased consequences, which started off helping them to understand. A drug awareness course, a bit like a driver awareness course, was one of the first things. And then it moved on to other sanctions. And I would like to see a situation where if they were if that person using but wasn't dealing was causing harm to other people, then I'd like to see that an element of sanction as well as an element of recovery in the consequences. But unfortunately, we're not there yet. And what we have at the moment is we have a tapestry of different police forces doing different things. And the cannabis warning, I don't think is fit for purpose. I'm glad we've got a diversion scheme here going forward. You are right, by the way, about Misuse of Drugs Act. It should never have been done the way it was done, because long-term harm is as important as short-term harm.
Thank you very much. Obviously, you oversee Dorset Police, which obviously has a large budget and responsible for policing in Dorset. We also have the Dorset Council's ASB team, who do a really good job, I must say. We also have housing associations, which has always been one of my big bugbears. Let me ask the question. Do you think that they should be playing a greater role in dealing with the issue of drug use and drug dealing? Because in my ward, a large number of issues come around from social housing, which is, considering there's hundreds of social housing units in my ward, and I live on a council estate, the vast majority of them have no involvement in drugs, but there are a small number of hotspots of where drugs are a major issue, and I think housing associations should play a greater responsibility and role as a landlord. And also touching on the subject of landlords, do you think private landlords also should have a greater responsibility in dealing with tenants who are misusing drugs?
Thank you. Again, you've touched on something which I care quite passionately about. The all-party political group for antisocial behaviour in government, their first meeting when they had it was actually looking at antisocial behaviour in housing associations. Now look, not all housing associations are the same. There will be some who have great antisocial behaviour officers and great workers, and they take their responsibility seriously, and they will address issues as they arise. But I'm clear that actually there is an onus on landlords. There is a clause, I think, in the Misuse of Drugs Act, and I have raised it with housing associations. Because whilst we're looking at the vulnerability of the person who's taking the drugs, we also have to understand that they are increasing the vulnerability of the people in the flats, if it's in flats around them. And therefore, yes, I think there is an onus on the landlord, and I have written to at least one housing association to remind them of their duty under the Misuse of Drugs Act, because that is one of the exact examples, I would say, where actually it is the needs of the community which outweighs the needs of the individual. If I had my way, and I have written to the Home Office about it, I would say that you strengthen that onus on landlords.
Do we have any other comments from the floor on the subject? I'm afraid I am going to have to make some commentary here. It wasn't really my intention. We do have differing ideas about approach. We're talking about the Misuse of Drugs Act. We have been trying the same thing for more than half a century. Einstein stated that the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Now, criminalising end users and people with addiction for relatively minor offences like possession does not sit with taking a public health approach to addiction. Harm reduction comes up often, but jailing people who are suffering from addiction issues isn't going to stop the root cause of this happening and the impacts in our society. We were talking about gateway drugs, but there's good evidence that the gateway to especially Class A drug usage is rooted in adverse childhood experience, hopelessness, and social deprivation. So I think there is a broader conversation to be had around some of these approaches. It feels unnecessarily draconian to target people with addiction who would benefit more from signposting than custodial sentences. That's my comment, and I look forward to your response.
Well, my response is very clear. We have got it wrong in this country. We have had it wrong for years. But we've had it wrong because we vacillate between two poles. One pole is we lock everybody up. The other pole is we give everybody, I'll rephrase what I was going to say. We treat everybody with a public health approach. And by doing so, we also facilitate and normalize the act. Every single piece of the drug discussion is complex. Every single piece is nuanced. And forgive me, Chair, but either I didn't express myself well enough or you misunderstood me, but I did say that actual criminalisation and locking people up for possession wouldn't be very useful, partly because our jails are full, but also I talked about what I would like to see, which was the tougher consequences white paper, which hasn't happened, which had a varied and increasing trajectory of actions. The first of which is awareness, the second of which is going to a recovery, and the third of which is a sanction. So forgive me, and I'm used to this, I'm called a Jurassic dinosaur, I'm called all sorts of names. You think I'm only about enforcement. I am not. There are three things which need to happen. One is enforcement, and I am not going to back away from that because that's absolutely necessary, because there are people out there who want to harm our people and particularly our children. Effective treatment. And that effective treatment has to be across all drugs. The drug which most kids are in treatment for is cannabis. The drug we focus most on when we talk about treatment and recovery is heroin. We have to be broader in our church. And the piece, the orphan at the feast, the bit why it hasn't worked for the last 40 years is because there is not enough investment in prevention. And we haven't changed the dial of the culture. People either don't talk about drugs because it's too difficult. People try to fire me. People have tried to fire me twice. I've had a death threat. My wife's been stalked. All because of my position on cannabis. And I am sorry, but I am not going to stay silent. And this harm will be shown. But if you want to solve it, you do what they did in Sweden, where they had enforcement, treatment, as you talk about, I totally agree with you, and prevention. And you get those three things right, and we'd have a better world.
On that note, Councillor Leary, I noticed you indicated, but we have dwelt quite a long time on this subject. I think we've got... I think we will have a lot of opportunity to continue to explore this, and I think we're all happy to have a chat afterwards. I'm conscious that this is a debate that could rage on for a while. Okay, I'll give you a very brief window, then we'll move on unless I feel compelled to respond.
Yeah, in regards to treatment of illnesses or medical conditions, it is the NHS and public health job to maintain that. It is the job of the police to enforce the law. The law is that cannabis and all these drugs are illegal, and that law should be enforced, is my opinion. I mean, I know I make the Police and Crime Commission look like John Lennon on the subject, quite frankly, but that is the law, and the law should be enforced, in my opinion.
Noted, Councillor Leary. Thank you. So, the next question on high harm is from myself. There has been a concerted effort to address County Line's drug supply in the county. I am interested to know what strategies have been put in place to eliminate Class A drug supply from in-county organised crime groups, and if there are strategies and units, if that isn't too operational.
Well, unsurprisingly, I can talk to some of it because this is about enforcement. And look, it needed to be gripped, which I'm certain will hearten Councillor O'Leary. When I came into office, it was largely around safe and well checks. What I did not see, which was in conflict with what the people were asking me, when I do surveys, when I talk to people, what comes out second to antisocial behavior usually is the issue of drugs and drugs in their communities. So there's been a couple of major changes since then. And by the way, county lines have morphed. The terminology, when it first came in, people thought it was about the trains and young people going on trains and delivering drugs down. That changed. And actually, the line is about the phone line and the mobile phones. So how are we going to address that? Well, we needed to address it in two ways. We needed to address the county line piece of transferring across borders. So we needed to go wider than Dorset. So that's why we played a leading role in setting up Operation Scorpion, which was a partnership drug operation, involves all 5 Southwest Police and Crime Commissioners and our respective forces. It also includes the Southwest Regional Organised Crime Unit and other key partners. This initiative aims to make the region hostile to illegal drugs. For example, we would work with the British Transport Police. They're part of the game, focusing specifically on disrupting supply networks, addressing the harms associated with Class A drug activity. So when Scorpion came in, we were very clear that we would put what we called a ring of steel around the 5 counties and try and stop drugs being passed down. We've had 13 iterations of it. Scorpion 12 was, actually we've had 12, the 13th is due. The last one was in June. 2 drug lines were taken out of operation. 24 arrests were made, £20,000 worth of drugs taken off the streets, £25,000 worth of cash, 3 vehicles, multiple knives, machetes, knuckle dusters taken out of circulation. Each Scorpion has had the ring of steel. Each Scorpion has then had an individual theme. So it could have been drugs in the nighttime economy. It could have been cannabis farms. It could have been knife crime. The overall effect of Operation Scorpion and other individual operations the forces have is that the threat risk of county lines has fallen. Now, what that means is these are businesses operated by serious organized crime groups. They will have morphed, and they have morphed more into local networks. So the recent Scorpions have also been looking at local networks, still using phones as their primary way of addressing the issue. So before I move away from the region, I should also note that on top of the Scorpion, the Regional Organised Crime Unit also do their own operations. They've been active in this area. They've acted on intelligence, and they addressed an organised crime group operating in the Bournemouth area, identified properties and vehicles used by specific individuals. That group was rolled up, 20 kilograms of cocaine, around £100,000 worth of cash, 2 early pleas from suspects, and extradition for 2 suspects who have legged it offshore. So that's the highest piece of enforcement, if I can put it that way. But we wanted it on our streets as well. And so central to this is Operation Viper, which is Dorset Police's proactive initiative, which targets criminality, removes drugs from the streets, shares intelligence, and protects the vulnerable. Using intelligence-led policing, it actually disrupts county lines, including the local networks, making Dorset a hostile environment for those dealing drugs, Class A drugs, but also you will be aware from what I've said earlier, I also think it should be dealing with Class B drugs. It's recognised across the whole Southwest region as best practice for tackling this issue. Clear, hold and build activity has progressed from the clear phase into the hold phase in those areas where that's applied, and that ensures further disruption of identified drug networks. neighbourhood policing teams continue to instigate fortnightly days of action targeting drug-related activity and drug-enabled crime. We've had 1,207 arrests through Operation Viper in the last year. However, the bad guys morph and change. And so what we've also got now is a Faster Parcels Dorset initiative. This enables the UK Border Force to intercept parcels including illegal items. This includes Class A drugs and weapons. So that's managed through the ROCU and also cascaded to Dorset Police. So I'm very pleased that this fast parcels is being gripped nationally and cascading down to Dorset. It is something we look at on the Combating Drugs Partnership, is our effectiveness and how we're addressing it. And what we've had delivered to us is a toolkit and policy which gives us greater understanding of how these Class A drugs enter the country. I'm determined that we keep moving. You may be aware that we managed to get money out of the Home Office for a new boat. I'm also clear that that boat will be part of addressing the drug issue. So if they think they're going to drop drugs off in our harbours and on our beaches, I'm expecting that boat to make a difference there as well. So I hope that gives you a bit of an overview of the two main operations, Scorpion and Viper, which is addressing the issue. And I'm going to make a plea now. The plea is this: those local drug networks you talk about, the cannabis farms which crop up, the way that they are rolled up is due to community intelligence. It is people telling the police. There's a place on the website which says share your intelligence. Please let the police know. And if you are worried about anonymity, then Crime Stoppers. Please phone Crime Stoppers. All those pieces of intelligence will go in together to address the issue.
Thank you for the overview. Do we have any follow-up, Councillor Leary?
Thank you very much. Obviously, we've gone from possession to dealing now. The average sentencing for drug trafficking of a Class A drug is around 7 years under current guidelines, but you can go up to 40. Trafficking things such as heroin, do you believe should actually carry a life sentence because it is in fact linked to murder in terms of actually killing people and ruining lives? And do you think that would help, by lobbying government to increase sentences for drug trafficking, would actually help deter people to get involved in the trade in the first place and actually put away people with the justice that they deserve?
It feels good, doesn't it? It feels attractive. I'm not saying it would make that much of a difference. I think if they're going to do it, they'll do it anyway. I think the key element is to make certain, though, because 14 years is a long time. My heart would say yes. But 14 years is a long time. What I'd rather see is that the sentence guidelines are really, really used. And so we don't have drug dealers and we don't have people who traffic drugs getting let off with a slap on the wrist. I would like to see there being a minimum mandated sentence for it, a significant one. And yes, I'd be quite happy to have a sliding scale, but isn't that counterintuitive with what I said earlier about the fact that ketamine, for example, isn't Class A currently? And I think it should be, and I think those sanctions should be the same. So where I am on it is yes, that would be lovely, but I'd rather see sentencing guidelines used and used effectively, so we've actually got some deterrent out there currently. And I'll be honest, I'd like to see something else happen. I'd like to see a Capone approach taken. Capone was done for tax evasion, not gangsterism. I'd like to see some of these drug dealers done for modern slavery and child exploitation, because you might be the big I am in prison if you are a drug dealer. You're not so lucky if you're in there for those offences. So I'd like to see that So I think there is something to be done. And I think there's elements that could be done before we take that step.
Thank you for the views on this subject. I very much agree with the targeting of the organised crime groups that are trafficking Class A's, especially crack and heroin in my particular area, into the middle of our communities. I think it is a question of cutting the head off the snake rather than the targeting of the vulnerable, hopeless, deprivation-led end users. But I think I would like to close on that point. We have a final question under this priority, again from Councillor Rampton.
Thank you, Chair. Before I ask my question, can I ask if there is due a comfort break? And if so, can it be soon?
Excellent question. We would normally be having one in about 10 minutes. I'm quite happy to bring that forward to right now, if everybody's in agreement. Okay. In which case we will adjourn for 5 minutes, if that's acceptable, with a bit of leeway for emergencies. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and welcome back. We will now proceed through our questioning of the priority areas within the quarterly monitoring report. We are on priority 3, fight violent crime and high harm. And I would like to hand over to Councillor Rampton to ask the next question.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the break. Yes, Mrs. Sidgwick, I was really interested to read about the A&E Navigator scheme, and I wondered how that worked, and that's sort of in the context of certainly Poole and Bournemouth hospitals, which are really, really busy, not so much Poole now, but Bournemouth Hospital, A&E, really busy. So is this a member of staff that's trained to be a navigator, or is this an extra person? Because I'm just thinking, you've got an influx of people, particularly after 11 p.m. usually, and a lot of them will be in there because they've had a punch-up or there's a knife issue or drugs. So how, in the context of that busy department, will somebody be able to navigate the person to whatever? Or is it somebody sitting down and talking to them? Tell us more. Thank you.
Well, in summary, this is new people, youth workers, basically working in the emergency department. So they're funded and they're new. So it is not taking away people who are already there, which I think is your primary concern. So basically, we co-commission the A&E Navigators with the University Hospital Dorset charity, who along with UHD, fully support and advocate for the programme. So basically, the hospital's on board with it. We reviewed a number of evidence-based initiatives shown to support the reduction of serious violence. I mentioned earlier, we looked at what other VRUs were doing, what was happening in other places. This is one of those initiatives. So we think, because attendance at the emergency department for that young person, that's a reachable, teachable moment. They're there, and they don't want to be there. They're there because of either serious violence or they've used substances. Having a dedicated youth worker there in high demand times reduces the pressure, actually, on the rest of the emergency department, because they actually have the time. They actually have the time to build a relationship with the young person, and they can coordinate onward referrals. So it's actually a benefit not just to the person being dealt with, but it's also a benefit to the wider department as well. And sometimes it will be that relationship which is key to allow that young person to open up, to allow them to get the treatment they need. So the youth workers within the programme will focus on crisis intervention, holistic assessment, and pathways for continued support, training, and supervision. It's provided by No Limits, which is a contracted service provider. They've got a track record in providing ED, so emergency department-based support for children and young people. Supervision is also provided by the lead paediatric consultant and duty nurse for each shift. So they do have somebody they can talk to if they have a specific problem. Youth workers are embedded within ED. They're also supported by the education team, safeguarding leads, paediatric staff I mentioned, the ED matron and clinical leads across both sites. Further training opportunities are being explored in collaboration with partners such as Dorset Council and BCP Council to strengthen staff knowledge, support and expertise with local provisions. Where we've seen this in other places, it's worked well to reduce the harm to that young person. And it's a teachable moment. If they're there with a, God forbid, if they're there with a knife wound, and it's because they've been carrying a knife, it's a possibility that we can make a difference. So that gives you a little bit more. It's been done in association with the ED department, and we're very keen on it, as are they.
I'd be interested to know when it's going to start, and if you, when you'll be able to come back and give us an update on the success. Thank you.
It started last month. I've seen initial reports, which are good, but I think we've got to give it, a length of time. I'd like to have a look at it after 6 months and then after a year. So perhaps when you're talking about your future work plan, you may want to think about when you'd like me to come back and talk about knife crime and that sort of thing.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Ampson. Are there any other additional questions under fight violent crime? So we will move on to priority 4, fight rural crime, which is led by Councillors Williams and Flagg. We do have a question again submitted by Councillor Ampson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. My question is around monitoring of gun licences, particularly in relation to people who might be deemed a risk. How do you hold the Chief Constable to account in ensuring that they are adequately monitored? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as the panel is aware, I'm not directly involved in issuing said gun licensing or indeed refusing. That's very much an operational matter for the Chief Constable and the Firearms and Explosives Licensing Unit. I will refer to that going forward as FILU. The function of the FILU is to discharge the Chief Constable's statutory obligations in providing licensing service to the public for firearm and shotgun certificates, as well as explosive licenses. This is administered under the Firearms Act 1968 to 1997, as amended, and the Control of Explosives Regulations 1991. So it's further supported by the College of Policing Firearms Licensing Authorised Professional Practice, which is the official source of professional practice for policing. This team deliver public safety through the appropriate licensing controls on firearms, ammunition and explosives. The team also provides an advisory service to the public, police officers and the shooting community. Now, of course, I'm responsible for holding the Chief Constable to account. So I do this by providing strategic oversight, not operational control. Performance management, requiring the Chief Constable to provide regular reports on firearms licensing. Providing scrutiny of risk management. So I challenge the Chief Constable regarding the robustness of vetting, for instance, and probing what checks are in place. I also engage with local stakeholder groups. So, for example, BASC. And I should pay tribute to BASC. They were instrumental in giving me the data I needed in order to bring firearms back to Dorset, because it used to be an alliance system. And one of the things that I have been very clear about, and which we did a lot of work about holding the force to account, was in the wake of the terrible tragedy in Plymouth and Keam, the changes which were required by the Home Office to the licensing to make certain that those were embedded across Dorset. I'm also clear that this is an area which we are not going to skimp on from the point of view of investment. And I think there's another 5 officers joining this area now in order to address the issues within it. In summary, the Chief is operationally independent and accountable to the public for firearms licensing decisions. I hold her to account and I ensure she's managing that safely and effectively by requiring data. So I ask for data. I question processes, performance monitoring, ensuring compliance with law and guidance, and provide public assurance that risks such as granting licenses to unsafe individuals are properly controlled. So I'm very clear that the priority has to be safety. So this group will know that in the past I've talked about efficiency and the fact that we had a backlog around particularly the renewal of firearms licensing. That had to be addressed and addressed going forward, because by having a backlog actually means you carry more risk. People will cut corners with what they're doing. As part of that work, we had an intensive deep dive into firearms licensing, what was happening, what's going on. I would like the government also to make a point around consistency, particularly around consistency of the medical element for the firearms license. So what a GP has to do and how much a GP has to charge, because that is, and the timeliness of that, because that varies across the country. So there's lots of elements within this, and I'm looking at it on a regular basis and holding them to account on it. I hope that helps.
Thank you both. Do we have any additional questions under fight rural crime? Councillor Flagg, then Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. On the following the issue of the rural crime packs and the onset of our longer, darker evenings or night times, would the Commissioner be in a position to provide the panel with a more in-depth report on the rural crime, in particular the theft of plant and machinery and the, I'm not sure whether you call it hair coursing or whether it's put down as poaching. Is that possible through you, Chair?
So as I understand it, you'd like a little bit more detail about that and what the real crime team are doing and all the rest of it. Do I understand you correctly? Right, okay. Let's take the hair coursing and poaching first. That is serious organised crime, as well as the agricultural theft, as well as livestock theft. Why do I say that? Because sometimes we know that sport, inverted commas, is propagated across the world. There is instances of laptops being used to basically film the sport, and that's about gambling. That's about betting on which dog will catch the hare, how often the hare jinx, and all sorts of other issues. And that's big money. The reason I know it's big money is because there is a totally illegal hair coursing cup. Not endorse it. But this cup was offered with prize money of £50,000. And the dog was worth crazy money of the same order. This is big money. So we are very grateful. We are continually grateful for the help of the community in order to address this, because we have members of the community who help spot and look for hair coursing. And since the rural crime team changed from being one and a bit, so a PC and a PCSO, or possibly two PCSOs, and has now become much more fit for purpose, we're able to take the fight to it. It has also become much more acknowledged as a problem. The actual penalty for hair coursing or poaching is small. It's a fine usually. But we were able to use cruelty to wildlife legislation in order to get custodial sentences for some very nasty individuals. It happens regularly that we do Operation Galileo now, which is where we come together with Wiltshire and Hampshire on our border in order to address that. Different parts of the county have more hair coursing than others, depending on the land and the type of crops. I'm not certain what else I can tell you about hair coursing, apart from the fact, as it says, we've got a reduction of about 20 to 25%. And we'll keep on doing that and keep on using the intelligence we've got. Agricultural theft. So that is propagated usually by a group. In some cases, they have been mapped as serious organised crime groups. The Royal Crime Team have been very effective at this. They've got £2.2 million worth of stolen goods back from those who've stolen it in order to give back to the owners. High Points, they got a digger back from Poland. They got a caravan back from Germany. They got a tractor back from that far-flung foreign place, Hampshire. They continue to be on the lookout in order to address that. What usually happens is you have a run on this, and then you find out who's doing it, and then they're able to address that, and that's exactly what they do. We also operate across borders. I talked about Operation Scorpion. I can feel the chair is getting twitchy about the length of my answer, so I won't go into great detail, but we also have something similar called Operation Ragwort, where we work together across borders. I think I'll stop there, because... Thank you, Councillor Flagg.
Thank you for the brevity, always appreciated. Does that answer your question, Councillor Flagg?
Yes, very good answer. Thank you. Just wondered if there is we could have a report which goes into further depth of numbers and figures, and is there any help that the rural crime packs perhaps are working? But the fact that we're going into winter is obviously a key factor.
Chair, may I suggest you have a discussion on your forward plan?
Yes, that sounds like a good candidate for a key line of inquiry, and we will discuss that with you after the meeting. Thank you. Any other? Councillor Williams.
Yeah, just a follow-up on the hare coursing. Is it all year round or is it seasonal?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think I will. I think there's an element of seasonality to it, but I think we'll bring that one back.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. This is something that actually cropped up recently, in as much as there was a report on regional television last night about it. I've had a recent bit of casework raised with me about it, and it goes back a long, long time. It's really familiar, and that's the use of high-powered catapults. And there has been evidence in the past that they've been used to harm not just wildlife, but farm animals. And there's one particular instance where the people that were involved in doing that obviously developed a taste for sadism or whatever, and went on to commit quite a notorious high-profile crime. And I'm wondering whether the Police and Crime Commissioner would perhaps think about supporting calls to toughen up the legislation regarding catapults, because at the moment, a young child can go out and buy a catapult, no problems. They're available and I know there's a problem that some fishermen legitimately use them for launching bait, and we had all this argument ages ago when it was a major concern in pool, but it is a lot of the time it's being used for the wrong things, and sometimes it's property, but quite often it's wildlife, farm animals, and it just gets worse from there. So I wonder if the PCC is considering backing calls for toughening up on that.
Well, look, yes, I totally agree with you, and yes, I am, and we've already had discussions about it. I'm on the board of the National Rural Crime Network, and that's one of the elements that we talk about. And I'm very clear that, yes, we should toughen legislation around catapults.
Excellent. Do we have any further questions on rural crime? Then we will move on to priority 5, put victim and communities first. And we have a question from Councillor Rampton. Oh, pardon me.
Am I on? Yep. Thank you, Chair. My question is around, we're calling it self-appointed policing groups, and in brackets, vigilantes. And I think we know exactly who we are talking about here. But does the PCC agree that there is a rise in these groups? And how do you hold the Chief Constable to account in managing the increase that we're seeing? And do you believe it's the seasonal focus of policing which tends to put police where they are most needed, and not necessarily in some parts of the town where this group is operating, which is encouraging their growth?
Really interesting question. Thank you for asking it. I think it's too simplistic to say that it's about the summer policing and the summer demand. I think there's lots of elements which contribute to these individuals deciding they want to take this course of action. We've talked about it a lot, we do have large predictable spikes which turn up in the summer from tourism. 25 million day visitors, I've talked about it a lot. That puts pressure on wider frontline capacity, and public frustration will be with slower responses. But those slower responses will be about responding to, well, we talked about it earlier. The 101, for example, will take longer. It isn't about responding to crime on the streets. So it's really fascinating, and sometimes it can be a single serious incident which drives thoughts about this. I mean, let me give you a different example. You have a small community. We've got lots of small communities. And there is a horrible crime there. Almost, I can guarantee it, somebody will say, well, let's get out and patrol the streets more on Facebook. So there's lots and lots of situations. And there's lots and lots of people operating to address that situation. We've got the Community Safety Accreditation Scheme by the local authority. We've got officers there. We've got street pastors which offer support. During the day, there's town rangers, for example, in Bournemouth. I greatly welcome contributions from citizens, and I'm proud of the strong ties we've got with the voluntary sector. We make good use and we support such national initiatives. We've got the special constabulary. You would have seen in the report earlier that actually we're recruiting. I would rather that people who want to make a difference join the special constabulary or become a police service volunteers. We're always looking for those. The point is this: police officers, PCSOs, and accredited community wardens have a range of powers. For the police, we give them not only powers, but we give them weapons in order to look after us and keep us from harm. Pepper spray, handcuffs, batons, tasers. But all of these people, whether they're the PCSO, the accredited community warden, or police officers, are subject to strict controls and oversight. Vetting, training, codes of conduct, operational protocols and processes, and of course, a transparent complaints procedure if things go wrong. Self-appointed groups have none of this, no statutory powers, no disciplinary systems, and no formal accountability to the public. Some people will see and feel that the idea might be a good thing. The actuality may be different. I was in Bournemouth only Tuesday night, and somebody actually spoke to me about this type of group. And they said that they'd seen them around and they felt intimidated. That is the other side of this coin. there is a risk of unlawful or discriminatory actions. Without legal training, groups may engage in activities that stray into harassment, impersonation of police powers, or perceived impersonation of police powers, or worse. And indeed, there are some reports elsewhere, let me stress, elsewhere in the country, where some groups have disproportionately targeted minorities or vulnerable groups, undermining cohesion. Something else is true, and that these groups prey on fear. The police, if they say something, myself, if I say something, it has to be factually accurate. It has to be clear. And all the time you are thinking about trust and confidence. They don't have to do that. And we've seen a range of reports from such groups continually suggesting that Bournemouth is a dangerous place. And that's throwing juicy bones to the mainstream media and certain social media individuals who only have one thing in mind, which is their own clicks or their own popularity. Let's be very clear. This exists for something which isn't there. The total crime in Bournemouth has gone down by 8%. The antisocial behaviour has gone down by varying between 2 and 26% when I talk about personal antisocial behaviour. And violent crime has gone down by 4%. So the stated position of Dorset Police about vetting, safeguarding, training is also my position on this. It is not up to either the Chief Constable or myself to manage such groups. That is beyond our jurisdiction. In the same way that we don't manage Neighbourhood Watch and we don't manage Community Speed Watch and we don't manage the town pastors. But I'm very clear on what the position is and where we are with it. And we will see how this develops.
Thank you for that. I do have a suspicion that some members of this group might not be eligible to join the special constables. That's just a wild guess. And I also believe that with the weather getting colder and wetter and darker, we may not see quite as much of them. But my fear is that come April next year, they'll be back and even bigger. And I take your point that you can't actually monitor, well, you can't police, nothing much that you can do about these groups, but is there not something that could be done in terms of your social media output to inform and tell the public that these groups are, they're not, they may have training, that's what they say, you know, all our members are DBS checked and they're all trained and they have first aid course and they have all this, but they are not approved by the councils or by the Dorset Police. So there's some messaging, some stronger messaging that needs to go out from the police and from the councils to try and let people know that these groups are not doing what they should be doing, which is, as you say, joining up an accredited organisation.
You will understand why I won't comment on your first comments. But that goes to the heart of this, is vetting and safeguarding. What you say is correct. There has been press releases by Dorset Police and all the rest of it, and it's an ongoing situation which I'm monitoring. I'm very clear that I expect this group to be called out when they do not tell the truth on social media, when hyperbole is there, and Dorset Police have made it clear that they're not working with the police. So yeah, it's something to watch. But actually, the thing which will remove it, and I had meetings this week about this, is there is a lot of people in Bournemouth who want the truth about Bournemouth to be put out there. To stop these mainstream media reporters picking on a few incidents and finding a few op-eds. Because people come to Bournemouth, we have 25 million day visitors. They still have wonderful times. People who live here have wonderful times. We have businesses coming into the centre of Bournemouth now. The place is beginning to flourish. We need to tell the truth, because this group is there for a reason which doesn't exist.
Anything further, Councillor Rampton?
Thank you, no.
We will move on to a further question from Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. What impact is the policing of the current protests having on, and this is hotels and other protests, having on both abstraction of police presence within communities and on budget, including costs relating to support provided by other forces?
Well, look, we had a perfect storm this year. Not only did we have people changing their behaviour in coming here, so there was a heat wave a month early, and people changed their behaviour. With working from home, people were able to be on the beach in Bournemouth every night of the week instead of just the weekends. So we had that. On top of that, we had a perfect storm around protests. Not only did we have protests about the war in the Middle East, which have been ongoing since that terrible start on October the 7th, but we also had the protests around the asylum seeker hotels. So we had a perfect storm. And those protests put an additional strain on the force. And guess what? That's not covered by the funding formula. I know I sound like a crack record, but it comes back to this. Now, the way they do it is they look at each protest. Each protest is risk assessed. Intelligence is gathered, taken into account the impact on communities and prioritised accordingly. The force utilises officers from other areas of activity. So that's why when something happens, if they need extra officers, they will call on them, which is why sometimes they have to come from elsewhere in the county or they have to come from other departments. Where this isn't sufficient to deal with increased risks, we'll draft in from other forces. This is common in policing. So, for example, when Mr. Trump came to Scotland, Dorset would have sent an officer up there. Not loads, but they would have asked for a specialist officer, and one went in order to do that. For us, when we have a protest, we will call for help in order to police that protest. And some of those officers will be specialists, some of them will be to give us the numbers we require in order to do that. This mutual aid makes certain that we can flex, it makes certain that protests, and we can still keep business as usual going on. Currently, the forecasting costs of policing due to the protests is around £500,000. We don't know the final cost, and we don't know the final total because two things. There may be more protests, but there may be also invoices still to be received from other forces. So let me be clear. I have already written at the start of the summer, when it first started, to the Home Secretary about this issue.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do you have a supplementary Councillor Trent.
I'll leave a supplementary for this time.
Thank you. Councillor Leary.
It may be perception, it may not be, but it seems that the number of protests in areas like Bournemouth have increased lately. If that is the case, will you be factoring in those costs, or will you be trying to project an increase in the cost of policing protests into future budgets?
It's a great question. If they think that the protests are going to be ongoing, then yes is the answer. I mean, we're keeping a close oversight on this. I'm very clear that because this is not something made in Dorset, particularly some of the protests around those hotels, then I want to be able to go to government and say, you need to give us money for this. It's not our fault. And I'm not going to go any further with that. But people of Dorset, a bit like the barge, shouldn't be paying for the policing.
Thank you for that question. That was very relevant. Do we have any further questions on this priority area? Then we'll move on to priority 6, make every penny count. I have a question based on the information in the monitoring report addendum. Could the PCC expand on the pay and performance budget variance of 400k and the potential impact of forced leavers on the uplift scheme penalties?
Thank you. Yes, I can. So at Q1, the pay and employment costs were forecast to be overspent by £413,000 for a number of reasons, including the pay award being higher than budgeted and a number of savings still to be delivered. These were partially offset by savings in police officer pay as a result of higher than budgeted leavers. This does mean that the force were anticipating not achieving the officer numbers as at the end of September, and an estimated penalty under the officer maintenance grants of £320,000 was included within that forecast, based on the information available at that point in time.
Thank you for the comprehensive response. That does help to clarify. I have this is a question that you will probably anticipate that I would ask, because I ask it nearly every panel. There are a number of thematic discussions that come out of all of these panels. One is the effect of seasonality on the force to be able to deliver a good service to the communities. The other perennial is the impact of the national funding formula on our ability to budget effectively. So a couple of things that I would note from the previous discussion was we got the lowest proportion of neighbourhood policing guarantee out of all force areas. At our position in the national funding formula is we get 0.8% of any police grant. A knock-on effect of this is because we get such a low grant, our council tax precepts is quite far above average in terms of what the residents of Dorset contribute. So I think you know where I'm going with this. What are the latest approaches you're taking to engaging the Home Office and lobbying for a fairer deal for Dorset?
Okay. So in April, I wrote a letter to the Home Secretary, which was very clear. This was about the national funding formula. This was about seasonal demand. It was about the unfairness on the people of Dorset from the point of view of the precept. I couched it in terms which You know I'm fairly direct, so let's be direct. I couched it in terms which meant it could not, I did not want the normal letter which told me how much had been put into policing generally. I'm not interested in that because that doesn't help us. To date, despite numerous chases, I have not had an answer to that letter. In July, because of the situation with the change in people's behaviour, the fact that we had more demand starting earlier, and the issues of the protest, I wrote a further letter about national funding formula, summer demand, the issue of the uplift and the fine in September. I also, because I am determined we are going to address the engagement issue, got the force to tell me what they needed, and we wrote a third letter asking for basically technology in the contact department, £10 million please, in order to address that specific issue. I am still waiting for responses to those letters. What I have done since, and it's slightly complicated because I understand the Home Office has talked to the force, for example, about the issue around the uplift, but I've had no response back officially to any of those letters. And so what I have done is I have canvassed and lobbied the MPs of Dorset because it is their residents who are in effect being done to with this. And I asked for, in principle, would they sign a letter for a meeting with the Home Secretary? They all came back and agreed in principle. I have since constructed that letter, asked for their signatures, and I'm running at 4 out of the 8 and hope to get the other 4. I've asked by the end of this week. So by the end of next week, I'm hoping that letter goes. That letter I have been directing about the funding formula and about the issue of the precept on the people of Dorset. Chair, I don't know what else I can do, but even on top of that, I did another thing, and I know this isn't the right quarter for it, but I also spoke to the chair of the National Farmers Union, and I was in London presenting to the House of Lords, and I made the point to both of those that actually rural forces, the lowest, let's call it that, the lowest 10 forces in the country when it comes to funding are effectively rural forces. So I am using every opportunity. I would enlist the aid of anybody in order to get this thing done. It's an injustice and we need to address it. And the tragedy for me is I know the numbers were run. And sitting in the Home Office are the numbers. And a few forces lose out, but Dorset would gain considerably. And that needs to be enacted. So I will keep on pushing.
Thank you for the comprehensive response. That marks, I have to say, quite significant progress from the last time we discussed this. When you say you will enlist the aid of anyone to support your efforts in this regard, the Police and Crime Panel for Dorset would also countersign a letter of endeavour to support your work in this regard. I think we are in an era where who shouts loudest gets what they ask for. Sadly, I don't really support that as the best way to do things. But if there's any way we can amplify your voice to get a fair deal for funding for Dorset, we are happy to do so, I would say.
Thank you. And yes, I do think there is something you can do. I don't want you to co-sign the same letter because I don't want to destabilise it. We're nearly there. I'd like to get that over the line. What you could do is, once I've sent that letter, I will copy you in. If you wanted to write your own letter in support, I would be very grateful.
That is a discussion that we can have as a panel. We could just have an informal show of hands for if the panel would support the drafting of such a letter. Excellent. Thank you, members. Do we have any further questions under the make every penny count priority?
Thank you. I also want to talk about you communicating with the government about our unfair funding, and I'm delighted that you're nearly over the line with the MP's letter. I don't. It's a shame to make this political, but necessarily it is. I wonder if you're able to tell us which MPs have been the most supportive and which MPs have been less supportive.
I'm not going to play that game. I'm sorry. I was elected as Police and Crime Commissioner. I took an oath to serve everybody. I play it non-politically.
There's no answer to that. Thank you.
Any further questions on making every penny count? In that case, we will move on from the quarterly monitoring report to the first of the two papers that has been presented. Item 6 is the road safety update around Operation Snap. We are getting tight for time. If we could have a brief introduction and possibly rely on questioning to flesh out some of the key elements, that would be appreciated at your discretion.
Okay. What I'll try and do then, in that case, Chair, is I will try and use the executive summary as a basis for what I'm saying. Look, Operation Snap is something which I really, really support. It is how the residents can actually make a difference if they see careless or dangerous driving. What the report does is it gives you an update. And how it works is the public can submit video or photographic evidence of dangerous or careless driving. It's managed by Dorset Road Safe, and it's part of the whole plan helping to reduce deaths and serious injuries on our roads. Since its launch, it's risen significantly year on year. So in 2020, when it first came out, there would have been a lot of publicity about it. We achieved 647. The submissions have risen to 2,764 in 2024. So this reflects two things. It reflects the wider use of dash cams and helmet cameras, but it also reflects an increased public awareness. It's not just about what comes in, it's also about the enforcement outcomes as well. Those have improved as well. The proportion of submissions leading to positive action, and that could be a prosecution, it could be fixed penalties, or it could be driver education. That's risen from 27% in 2020 to 43% in 2024. Overall, 3,715 road users have faced consequences ranging from warning letters to court prosecution. So that basically, hopefully, contributes to deterrence, but also, above all, behaviour change, because that's what you're trying to get. Now, look, all the efforts, not just of Dorset Police, but the partnership Dorset Road Safe, is focusing on tackling the fatal 5 causes of serious collisions: drink and drug driving, and don't start me on the drug driving bit, speeding, seatbelt, not using the seatbelt, mobile phone, and distraction, and obviously careless or inconsiderate driving. The evidence from OpSnap complements enforcement by road policing and the No Excuse team. while also allowing communities to basically play a proactive role in road safety. You know about the driver awareness courses, we've talked about those before. We know about Community Speed Watch, all these things work together. Despite its successes, however, OpSnap has got some key challenges. You know what it's going to be. Processing submissions is resource intensive. There's no dedicated team, so it's the staff from the central ticket office and driver awareness scheme who carry out this work alongside their core duties. They also have occasional support from specialist officers when they need to check something. It could be a piece of evidence that they're not certain about, etc. High volumes of submissions cannot always be processed promptly, and the evidential thresholds, particularly in close path incidents involving cyclists, can be difficult to meet. Now, with that number of submissions, it isn't possible to update every individual on what's happened with their submission. So that can lead to frustration with some members of the public. It is the financial and staffing constraints which remain significant. Without additional investment, Dorset Police have got to prioritise the greatest risks, which limits OpSnap's capacity. However, opportunities may exist to improve efficiency through automation and artificial intelligence. We're looking at that. We're looking at that all the time. And also, I think there is something about public guidance to reduce low-quality submissions. Because obviously, they've got to look at everything. If we could get the quality of submissions up, that would help. Looking ahead, I mentioned earlier about Dorset Road Safe. There's a strategic assessment of Dorset's collisions and casualties, which will inform the revision of the road safety delivery plan, prioritising the most pressing risks and making certain that we stay on course to get to zero. So, in conclusion, this is brilliant, it's valuable, it's community-driven, I love it. It's grown substantially in volume. And while resourcing challenges persist, this scheme is still important and makes a meaningful contribution. It helps Dorset Police hold offenders accountable, and it supports that ongoing reduction in road safety, which we're trying to get. It's reduction in road safety harm that we're trying to get.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do we have any questions regarding the paper from the floor? Councillor Gibson.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the report. It's very interesting. It builds on some of the questions I raised at the last panel about coordinating data around relatively minor road safety matters, because they all lead into something bigger. I do accept that Operation Snap sits alongside other policing priorities, and within Operation Snap, it looks at what you've termed the fatal five. I've got a question about the paper, then I've got a question about funding. The question about the paper is it's not quite clear where parking sits within Operation Snap. It mentions that generally it sits elsewhere. It points people towards local authorities. Those of us that have been a councillor for any length of time knows fine rightly the gaping chasm between what the council will say and what the police will say when it comes to dangerous parking. And it's one of those issues that's in my ward very relevantly at the minute that I'm struggling to solve, because it seems if I go to my road safety team, they'll point me to the police. If I go to the police, they'll point me to my road safety team. And I know there's some work that gets done in the road safety partnership to try and manage the hotspots. But if you've got a process where a traffic regulation order might take, for example, 18 months to get in place, and you've got an under-resourcing of Operation Snap, that means that can't possibly deal with everything that comes into it, we've got a bit of an issue here, because it's very hard to make any meaningful progress quickly on something if you, for example, you get an area where truly dangerous parking pops up quickly. So what I really want to know is where do you see parking sitting within Operation Snap, and how can we make it, if it's not within Operation Snap, where would you go if you were me to try and get these issues dealt with?
I don't think I'm going to answer the question of where it sits in Operation Snap. I'll tell you why, because it is wickedly complex as to where parking sits between local authorities and police. What I would rather do is, I know that we've unpicked this. I've answered residents on this question before. What I'd rather do is give the panel basically the whole 9 yards of what sits where. And then you'll be able to see if that makes sense. Is that acceptable?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
I would just like to say that is an excellent question, and it does raise some quite interesting potential outcomes. The idea of including parking in OpSnap and delegating out some of the enforcement is quite an interesting one, I feel.
Chair, can I remind you about the fact that we have a problem with resource now? So if the local authority is prepared to give me significant funding in order to upgrade Operation Snap to include parking, then I'd be delighted. But it won't. You see the problem we've got at the moment.
It's an interesting thought to explore. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you. The reason I asked that question first, before probably the question more relevant to the paper, was I was conscious that I was likely to be asking for an addition to Operation Snap rather than scrutinising what is currently the main focus of Operation Snap. But in 3.9 in the report, it gives a summary about the budgetary challenges. And it says something that we all know, which is if we had more money, we could do more on this area. That's not a surprise. That's true for local councils across everything we do. Same for you guys in the police. But it does lead a question that, if we want this panel to be productive, it's a two-way conversation here. And this is one of those areas where councils have a role. It's not just scrutinising what the police do. I sat very briefly on the Road Safety Partnership when I was the Highways lead officer for this council. And I suppose the question I've got is whilst we always ask you what you're doing with your budget, do you have an ask of the two councils about what we should do with our budget? Because we're starting that process now.
Yes, we do. And that's been talked through with Dorset, at Dorset Road Safe, where the local authorities are on the board. But that needs to be driven from strategy and evidence. And that's a strategic assessment which is going on at the moment. I will say one thing, though. And the one thing I'll say is we know where our hotspots are in Dorset. We know where the issues which residents talk to us about. And a focus on those hotspots to fix those issues, I would gratefully accept. Because quite often the issues are not within the policing sphere. And it has to be a partnership approach in order to address them. So the more close the cooperation can be, particularly about those hotspots, I think that would make a difference for everybody. Does that make sense?
If I may, Chair, I'll be really quick.
If you could be quick, thank you.
It mostly makes sense. I think I'm still unclear what the ask from your side of the table might be of local councils specifically. We as councillors will be asked to participate in our budget, and I'm still not quite sure what those asks are because I don't sit in that area anymore.
Well, as I said, it needs a strategic assessment to be done and presented. That's being done in December. We're talking to the local authorities as it happens. I would expect the asks to be a general ask to continue the support for Dorset Road Safe, etc., 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 and the things we are doing, and specific asks around hotspots. So where we've had a significant road casualty issue, it may be that the solution is road furniture. It may be to change what occurs there. That needs to be addressed. But I'm not going to say, here's my ask, because I haven't got the assessment in front of me to say, actually, councillor, we need more road furniture on the A30, or we need more road furniture on the B3157. That is worked through via Dorset Road Safe. December is when we're going to be looking at the,
Councillor Trent, we will need to be brief on this item if we want to stay on target. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Heard a lot about the resource intensiveness of Operation Snap and also the need for extra resources to to improve the speed at which things are dealt with, would one possible course of action which would help with the threshold and with the gaining an income from it be to perhaps focus more on driver awareness outcomes from Operation Snap than necessarily going the whole hog for fines and so on? Would that actually help by generating some income from the driver awareness courses? Would that be a better way of maybe sort of breaking the logjam slightly?
So we're not allowed to derive any income from Operation Snap. So that kind of stops that. It's not the outcome where the issue is. It's the physical time of making the assessment and whether it fits the evidential threshold. That's the time, and that's where the resource is. So it's not delivering the outcome at the end, because that's fairly easy. It will go down various paths depending. It's the actual physicality of being able to look at it and whether it meets the evidential threshold and the numbers that come in order to do that. That's where the resource problem is.
Yeah, I can understand that, but it's whether something like that would help with the evidential threshold and would make it a less intensive process, even if there isn't any income derived from it. Would it make it a less intensive process if, a matter of half a metre here and there, would be less critical if...
Not sure. Don't think so. But I think we're talking about something which also would fit, which is more awareness done about the evidential threshold. I think more awareness to the public, so as we reduce low quality submissions, is the way for us to go. I think that's where we should go. Anything to add, anybody?
I'm just going to make one point, which I hope is correct, but when you're offered an awareness course, you're offered a choice of the course or the points. So I don't believe it's possible to disaggregate from that. Ultimately, it has to meet the evidential threshold to give the points. So I don't think that's an option that's possible.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. Do we have any other questions on the paper? Councillor Wood, I think, just pipped. Oh, really? Okay, so we were within a hair's breadth of finishing on time, but we are going to have to put a vote in to extend. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it looks like we will exceed those 3 hours that are set out in the Council's constitution for meetings, so we just need to seek the panel's agreement to proceed, so we just need to propose a seconder and a show of hands, if that's okay.
I'm happy to propose...
And as everybody else can take just a show of hands of support. Yeah, thank you.
Well done. Thank you, members. I don't anticipate this will take too much longer, but we are doing some excellent scrutiny, and I thank you for bearing with us. So, that's right, Councillor Wood. I believe you just won the race there, and Councillor Hampton will follow.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a question regarding, obviously, the resourcing issue we've talked about quite a lot. Is there a building backlog of things to review now, or is it kind of like stable? Like, as obviously submissions are increasing, which is obviously a great thing, are we also, with the increased pressure, falling behind on what's being submitted, is my question.
So I believe that there will be times of the year when there will be backlogs. An obvious one will be the summer for the similar reasons. When you look at the fact that this is an additional thing that those people have to do on top of everything else they've got. What I know is that the reason that they sometimes get other officers in is to help clear backlogs when they get them. So I can't tell you the exact point on October the 8th, whether we've got a backlog or not, but I do know how they try and address it. But there is no service level agreement that they have to hit, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Councillor Woods. Any further questions on the paper? Councillor Rampton, my apologies.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say that I completely disagree with you on Operation Snap. I really, really don't like it, just as I really didn't like Community Speed Watch. And I felt that that led to sort of community tensions and people kind of, filming, not filming, but, holding something up and when it was a neighbour, and I had several incidents of that happening in my ward, which wasn't great. And a lot of my distaste for Operation Snap is down to one individual who will be well known to you, and it's a councillor at BCP Council, and his enthusiasm has led to certain inappropriate behaviours, and also it has caused many an argument on social media and set person against person. So there are other reasons I don't like it. But my actual question, I'll get to the point, my actual question is, in the second paragraph, it says that 3,715 road users, that there's been deterrence and behaviour change. But I'm wondering how you actually measure those outcomes and that they are down to the Operation Snap, or could there be other factors like your no excuse team or something? Where's the proof that that's been due to Operation Snap?
So, look, you're going to have your opinion about Speedwatch, you're going to have your opinion about Operation Snap. All I know is that Dorset is one of the safest places in the country when it comes to our roads, despite our strange and antiquated road network. Those are elements within which drive that safety. Without those 800 odd community speed watch people doing their things, I don't believe we would have and be on course for the reduction in our killed and serious injured. Regarding Operation Snap, can you tease out and say this bit's due to Operation Snap? This bit's due to no excuse, this bit's due to that? No, you can't. But all the things together. And we do know that this will be an element, like Speedwatch, and you get the letters, to help reduce people's behaviour on the road. Now, you will have been affected by your experience by one individual, I am sure. I'm not going to comment on that individual. But all I can say is OpSnap is part of the mix, and its prioritization is as part of the mix and not as the single answer, which possibly is where I disagree with that individual. I hope that's good enough.
Thank you, Councillor Rampton. Any further comments on the paper? Councillor Wood.
Yeah, just more of a curiosity, I suppose, about how the logistics of it work. In the background where you're collecting these bits of video evidence and things like that, is that the same as, for example, when you're getting other forms of intelligence? Are you sharing the same system for all of that, or is it a completely separate components?
Sorry? Has it combined yet?
It all goes into DEMS.
It all goes into DEMS, so it has combined now. No, that's what I thought. At the moment, OpSnap is separate. The other bits of video come into the DEMS system, the Digital Evidence Management System. At some stage, it would be good to get everything combined. But what you're talking about there again is technology and money and all the rest of it. So at the moment, they're still separate.
We will now move on to the second paper on item 7, which is enhanced video response. And I'll pass over to the Police and Crime Commissioner to introduce the paper with the usual caveats. Brevity, if we may, at this point. Thank you.
I don't know. Okay. Right. Enhanced video response. So I was really, really excited when I first saw this, because when I came into office, my post bag had a significant proportion of people, and the issue on the post bag, what's the matter? I'll start again. I'm really pleased about EVR when I first saw it, and excited, because my post bag, when I came in as Police and Crime Commissioner, had a significant number of people in it saying that their main gripe was that they were being told they'd be interviewed on X date and the police weren't there, and it was taking up to 3 weeks for them to be interviewed and all the rest of it. And that, to my mind, was unacceptable when you had a crime. So this report provides an update on the EVR program, which uses video technology to resolve suitable grade 3 incidents. This isn't a 999 call. This is where a crime has happened, and in a slower time period, there needs to be an interaction between the police and the victim, or the police and indeed possibly a witness. EVR is designed to improve service to victims, reduce delays, and free officers to focus on urgent calls, while maintaining, very important this, maintaining the rigor and the safeguarding standards. Now, we're all seeing a demand rise, and the public are increasingly expect digital first services. But why I'm excited about this is there will be times when the victim does not want a police car outside their house. A victim of domestic violence, for example, a classic example. And this serves two purposes in my mind. It serves a purpose around efficiency, but it also, and it's a dangerous concept, but I talk to the force about it a lot, it's also about customer service. And that is why this does not replace a police officer coming to see you if that is what you want. The offer is made that you can have this route or you can still have that. So this works for grade 3. There's no immediate threat or need for urgent attendance. It's, as I say, victim-led. It isn't used for missing persons, welfare concerns, or road traffic accidents. And the way it works is that victims speak to officers and the platform's secure. It enables evidence sharing and statement taking and safeguarding assessments equivalent to in-person visits. We trialled this in 2023. We had 1,000 cases which demonstrated substantial benefits. Response times were 19 days faster. To me, that's a huge win. But a better win, one which wasn't expected but makes sense, is positive outcomes increased by over 70%. The quality of the interview and the evidence is better, meaning that you are able to take the case forward and get a better response. Investigations were seen to be more compliant with the College of Policing standards. Here's the rub. I had somebody in that trial, a victim, phone me to tell me they'd been in the trial and how wonderful they thought it was. Now, I don't get that very often, so I was quite excited about that. Victim satisfaction rose significantly, with 83% satisfied with their response compared to 60% for traditional methods. Nearly 90% said they'd use it again. So as a result, it's been adopted force-wide. It now manages over 45% of all attended grade 3 incidents, finalising around 75% of cases. This has improved wider force performance across all core grades, reduced backlogs in the force control room, and freed patrol officers for urgent duties. Financially, Cambridge University estimates savings of £180.95 per incident, which makes about £1.8 million reinvested into frontline policing. It's also delivered well-being benefits. One of the hardest things when you're doing a job you love passionately, is when you can't do it anymore. Particularly with policing, when most people come into policing to make a difference. So if you are unfortunately not able to because you've been injured or whatever, this allows those officers still to make that difference. And they're able to contribute to that public-facing work which aids recovery and also retention. Patrol officers report that they've improved their workload balance and job satisfaction. And force control room staff experience more manageable caseloads. So governance is strong, all right? There's regular performance oversight by the chief officer team and ourselves. EVR has been supported for national rollout. The Home Office and the HMIC FRS have talked about EVR as best practice. It's nice to be an innovator, even if we are small and we have our financial constraints. There are now 15 forces utilising EVR. And Dorset received a national award from the Society of Evidence-Based Policing. Challenges remain: public awareness, the cost of technology, estate changes, and ensuring the continued visibility of officers in community. Nevertheless, EVR has delivered faster, higher quality, and more victim-centred services while saving money. We're going to continue to refine and expand it, monitor outcomes, and share best practice nationally. That's the summary. I'm really interested to see where it goes and how far we can develop it over the next few years.
Thank you, Commissioner, for the very comprehensive executive intro. Do we have questions on the EVR paper from the panel? Councillor Wood.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. I think this is a great thing from reading the report. I was really this is a very sound solution, and I like the way it contributed to the well-being, like you mentioned as well. I thought that was great. One thing I was thinking, though, is how do you envision to prevent, for example, this ending up in a similar situation where you're not able to deliver things on time as you would expect when the demand for it maybe is too much? Would you then be trying to manage it through the force control room, saying that's not an option because it's overloaded? How are you hoping to kind of cope with, if there is a building demand with everything, there are these resource issues, you know? So that's my basic concern there.
Well, look, it's going to have to go into the mix like everything else, and they will flex accordingly. I'm very clear, though, that this is a huge benefit. Not everybody will want it. Not everybody will use it. But it has to be a benefit because it allows the officers who don't have the travel time that they would have had to actually use that for something else. Whether we become eventually so overloaded that we can't offer it, I doubt that. But like everything, it will obviously have to flex according to our resources, and we'll see where we get to. But they will look at this in the mix of everything else. And governance is strong about looking at our response to grade 3s, grade 2s, and grade 1s. So if it starts going pear-shaped, I will know about it and we'll start talking about it to address it.
Councillor Rampton.
Just a compliment this time. I think this is a great scheme, and I particularly like the well-being aspect of it. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Williams.
Yeah, with regard to EVR in rural areas where connectivity sometimes isn't very good, is there a problem there?
Not that I'm aware of. It's never been flagged. And the only thing I can say is that that first person I mentioned, that was about a rural crime on a farm. So no, there's been no issue in that regard. And I think that's something which they will make certain of when they do it, is basically the connectivity is good. So.
Thank you for the response. We have a question from Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to circle back to the quarterly monitoring report, which does not yet show victim satisfaction as green. And it seems evident that EVR will raise victim satisfaction. I just wonder, the slight other side to that is that, you know, for every police car that isn't parked outside a victim's house, there are scores of people that don't have that kind of, oh, look, the coppers are out and about, that recognition. I just wondered whether you thought that necessary lack of visibility in our communities was a problem, although you might think it's worth it.
Well, I think that there's a number of ways to answer this question. I mean, look, trust and confidence comes from a number of areas, and actually getting somebody seen 19 days quicker actually will build that trust and confidence. The issue of whether there's a police car outside the house or not, obviously, if we're saving officers time, I would expect those officers to be doing something, and I would expect them to be being visible. So, yeah, we should get that, and I want them to be in the hotspots. I want them to be dealing with the things where the reports have come in to say there's an issue. Not sitting outside somebody's house having travelled 2 hours there or whatever when they didn't need to. If this is the answer, and it looks like it will be a significant part of the answer to getting better efficiency in Dorset Police, then we should embrace it and run with it. And if we weren't getting the numbers in victim satisfaction from it, then I'd be the first to say this thing ain't going to work. But it seems to be that we are. 83% said they were fairly or very satisfied compared to 60% which didn't. 43% of EVR participants stated their opinion on Dorset Police had improved. When was the last time you heard that? That says to me this thing is the right approach and we keep embracing it. As long as we make certain, this is the caveat, we make certain that that officer time is invested into visible frontline policing. And that's the bit that I talk to the chief about a lot.
Any further questions on the paper? I would like to commend the paper and the programme. A programme that delivers cost savings, high levels of victim satisfaction and better outcomes by 70% is really quite something. It's great to see that we are bringing schemes like this forward. So we will now move on to item 8, which is the complaints updates. Mark, do you have an update for us?
Thank you, Chair. Since the last meeting, there have been 2 complaints made. One is currently being reviewed and further clarification information has been submitted by the complainant. The second one was closed and not upheld. Aside from the complaints themselves, there remains an action on me from the last meeting to seek membership of the complaints subcommittee, and I've not yet actioned that, but it is still on my radar, Chair.
Many thanks for the update, Mark. Any questions on the complaints update as given? Okay, in which case we will move on to item 9, the forward work plan. if you have your copy of the workbook that was sent out, at the back we have a table that is looking a little sparse at the moment. We have a key line of inquiry coming up for December in the form of a deep dive into the impact of seasonality on the delivery of the budget and the police and crime plan. I would ask members to note this and to remain just for 2 or 3 minutes after the panel meeting to potentially identify other key lines of inquiry to put into the forward work plan. Beyond that item, we have item 10, urgent items. Are we aware of any urgent items? Item 11, exempt business. Do we have any? We do not. In which case, I would like to thank all of the members, the Police Crime Commissioner and his officers and the Dorset Council Democratic Services staff for all of your contributions and some really good detailed scrutiny. I think at this point we will call the meeting to a close. Okay, are we offline?